at San Diego Safari Park.
Okay.
Can you imagine that? Sitting all day? So we have 3 in total, 2 females, 1 male. Male one is...
Sizes with different animals and groupings in them. Like over here on the right, you're going to see our greater flamingo flock, and they're the only birds in here, though there are 200 of them. And they have this little space to themselves of the marsh delta. That's why they have the fence in to separate them from everything else. And it's also because they do prefer it. They used to have access to the entire marsh area over here, but it was actually too much space for the flamingos. Because they rely so heavily on safety and numbers in the wild, they don't really have a sense of personal space. In fact, they don't really like a lot of space. They like to have a really dense clustered flock of birds because that's how they feel safe from predators. So we recreate that feeling for our flamingos here at the park by having a smaller exhibit size where the flock feels really dense and big, and then they feel protected from predators and they feel safe and happy in their habitats, and they get to practice their natural behaviors, which does include breeding. We are a conservation and breeding center here at the park, so we always encourage those babies. And reproduction is not going to happen unless these animals feel comfortable in their homes. A lot of the deer like to come out underneath the bushes and trees and everything, and they become more visible. But if you do see an animal walking out on the path around you, don't worry, it's not an escapee. It is a local mule deer resident. But we have a lot of beautiful Southern California species that like to make their home here at the safari park, and we definitely encourage that. A lot of the hills you see out here are all part of the safari park, even though they aren't exhibits for our exotic animals. We've set aside about 800 of the 1,800 acres here at the safari park as a local reserve to protect our native plants and animal species, because we are leaders in conservation. And we want to protect our backyard animals just as much as we do these gorgeous exotic ones that you guys have come to visit. In this big field enclosure we're about to go around with the other herds of animals to be territorial and a little selfish by nature, it's a very harsh life for all of these animals. They have food and resources are not always readily available. They can be very scarce, and they have a lot of heavy predation. So it makes sense that they're more concerned about themselves than other animals. But that does mean that they can have an attitude sometimes, so the other animals are very happy for them to have their own space out, because you get to see they are absolutely gorgeous birds. I think they're very different from the stereotypical image most people have of vultures. They have that gorgeous speckled plumage, and they're just very charismatic. And I know vultures do have an ominous reputation. They are scavengers, so they are eating the dead animals in the environment. And if you think that's gross and a little icky, just imagine if they weren't there to do that. How much more gross dead bodies would just be lying out in the landscape, and how much more disease there would be if they weren't there to clean it up. So vultures are absolutely essential for a clean and healthy habitat. And hopefully you guys get to tell your friends and family and turn their reputation around for them, so that we can all appreciate how amazing vultures are. Alright, over there on the left by those tall palm trees, you're going to see the springbok. They're the ones a little bit on the move over there to the shade. There are a couple of young babies in that herd as well. The springbok are a tiny little antelope species, as you can see. They do live in the savanna, so that golden coloring on the top portions of their bodies is perfect camouflage for that. They all have very similar coloring, a lot of warm colors, browns, yellows, oranges, and that's because these colors blend in so well with the greenery of their habitats and the landscape around them. We're going to get a beautiful view of a couple of our giraffe right here. And they also have that warm orangey coloring for blending into the environment. You can also see the beautiful iconic spots are going to help them blend in with the lights and shadows of the trees that they spend most of their time in. So you guys are getting some gorgeous pictures of Obi and Yoda right here, these two young boys. When you go back to your photos, make sure you put some of them in black and white. you're going to see how that orange color really helps disappear into the green landscape. And that'll apply to any of our animals here. You put your photos in black and white, you get a better idea of how the coloring matches their environment. Because the black and white photos are a better simulation of how these guys see the world. They don't see in full range color like we do, though they do see color, just much more muted. But also, if you got a picture of Yoda in the shade there, you'll see the dappling from the lights and shadows on his spots really mix in with that, and it helps him blend in with those lights and shadows. So he really can also blend in with the low-hanging branches and foliage of the trees. So in this exhibit, you will see none of our trees have a lot of low-hanging branches or a lot of low canopy. And you will see, unlike most of the animals that I talk about on tour, the Cape buffalo do not blend in to their environment, especially if you take photos and put them in black and white. You'll see in full range color or in that black and white photo, the Cape buffalo do stand out against the background. And that is intentional on their part. They are instead communicating to all of the animals on the savannah, instead of trying to hide from them, that they're a herd of Cape buffalo and this is where they're hanging out, so keep back. Because all the other animals know Cape buffalo are some of the biggest and strongest animals out on the savannah. And they know not to mess with these guys. So the dark, and it's a warning color to other animals to keep their distance, because it's a very bad idea to mess with Cape buffalo, especially if you're a predator. Because if you try to go after one Cape buffalo, you're gonna have that entire herd to deal with, because they will defend each other. They're very protective. You know, at the moment, she has come in here to have lunchtime. She's a gorgeous girl. So we are hoping that we do get another male in a male black rhino in the future, so that we can start a breeding program with her. But right now, for her conservation, the best thing that we're doing for her is providing her a home and a space to live. And we do work with other zoos around the world. So if another zoo has an extra male that has done his job at their zoo and just needs to go somewhere else to reproduce and help with that breeding program, we would be very happy to take him in and introduce him to Aria. And that's all through a management program called a species survival, so that hopefully if they're not doing too well in the wild, we can have programs in place to reintroduce them back out there and keep them in their native habitats. So Aria, at the moment, her species survival plan for us is just giving her a place to live. But of course, we're always hoping to be part of the breeding program in the future. So we have a lovely view up here on the bridge. I can see some people looking on the right. So closer to our end, you're going to see along the water some red-fronted gazelles. From my point of view, on my position in the tram, if I look through these little smaller trees on the opposite side of the water on the right exhibit, there's a very large red antelope in the very back there. It's called a bongo. It's a tropical forest antelope. So if you're in the very back and you can't quite see it, I'm about midway on the bridge, and if you just look towards the back, straight back in the exhibit, you might get a glimpse of it. And then of course over here on the left, these and in their lifestyle, they're not as competitive with each other. So the girls don't need horns. They have more resources. They don't have to fight as much within the herd. But a male Uganda cob is always going to have horns, because he always has to fend off rival males, and he's got to impress these beautiful girls. He's got to step up his game to show them what a good male he is. The roan antelope right here, by contrast, these bigger antelope, live in a much more arid environment. They have a much more desert-like habitat. So they have a little bit of a tougher existence by comparison to the Ugandan cob. Food and resources might not be as consistent, so there might be a little more competition in their herd. So everybody has horns, males and females, because they all have to compete with each other. Antelope at the tram station, who also have the stripes, because they're also a forest antelope. These guys are a little more of a neutral brown than the more orangey Nyala antelope, but they have the same idea. The white stripes are breaking up their body silhouette to help them camouflage into their in their forest environment. Same as the giraffes are doing with their spots. Spots and stripes have the same out in the environment, so more of their body needs to be focused on disappearing into the overall background. So they don't have a lot of high visual contrast markers that other animals could possibly see, because they're just bigger and they take up more space. And then over here on the right, hopefully part of the conservation that you take home with you is going to be education and awareness. That is a big part for us to tell you guys about these animals, why they're so amazing and why it's so great to have them here. So hopefully you're really excited about them when you go home. And hopefully you spread that to your friends and family, because education and awareness is a big part of conservation. Getting people to want to work together and care for these animals so that they can have a future. And the rhinos are a great example of that. It's going to be the last conservation story I tell you guys on tour here, but it's, you guys can remember nothing else from tour. This is one of the most important things I can tell you. Rhinos are incredibly endangered in the wild. They're very heavily poached. We lose about 3 a day because of those gorgeous horns on their faces. Unfortunately, a lot of traditional medicines and cultures think that rhino horn will cure anything from the common cold to cancer. And if you guys can remember nothing else, I want you to remember that that is not true. Rhino horn is literally effective in medicine as chewing on your fingernails, because it is literally the same thing. It is the exact same protein that makes up your hair and nails. So there's nothing mystical or magical about a rhino horn or any of the horns on these animals that you guys see, besides how gorgeous it makes them look. And whether you've heard that a billion times or for the first time, spreading that message around to everyone you know is a very important thing, so that no one ever mistakenly or intentionally, heaven forbid, buys rhino horn or any other animal body parts, because that's the best way to help eliminate the poaching for them, is to eliminate the market and the want for it. So, as I said, if you guys remember nothing else, I want it to be that so you can spread it like wildfire and tell all your friends on social media.